Okay, so let's talk about where we're up to.
Exactly.
We're in the middle of a broad topic, and today I want to kind of drill down a little more into this topic. The topic is Vinir Tzalol Chaper Alav, and basically the Ola. We came across it in the context of Shinui Bailim, which was the last major topic we talked about. Our Mishnah in Daf Bet talks about if I do Shinui Kodesh, I change, ostensibly, if I do Shinui Kodesh, and if I change an Ola into a Shlamim, that's how Rashi defined the Mishnah. That's what Lo Lishma is. From Lo Lishma, we turn into all sorts of other things about when you have different machshavot or different articulations of something else other than what the korban is supposed to be. But what we noted is that it's not 100% clear exactly what the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah never says the word Shinui Kodesh, and it actually never says Olah L'Shem Chatat or something like that. It never says those words. It just Kol Zvachim Shenishmachu Lo Lishma Sherim Ela Shelo L'Balim Shem Chova, except for Chatat and Asham. And in fact, as we said, as we noted last time, and this is the second source on your page, right? The Gemara on Daf Yud Aleph is already going to expand the Mishnah according to Shimon ben Azai, even though the first Mishnah says Kol Zvachim Shenishmachu Shelo Lishman except for Chatat and Asher, and Chatat and maybe Asham according to Pesach, Chatat, we talked about the uniqueness of Pesach, the uniqueness of Chatat, and maybe Asham in the Mishnah. Shimon ben Azai, in the second source in front of you, says right, that famous day when Rabbi Lezer was appointed the Rosh Yeshiva, all of them are ksherim, okay, that's basically a re-articulation of our Mishnah, right? Maybe a word or two off, but the same thing, right? If you do something shalol lishma, it counts. You just don't, right? You just don't get the V, except for Pesach and Chatat. V'lo siv ben Azai ela ha'olah. Ben Azai expanded the Mishnah to include Olah. So we ask ourselves the question: why would Olah yes be part of the lo lishma? Why would it not be part of the lo lishma? Or no, why should it be in that category? And what we began to discover, again, based on the Gemara we talked about Shinui Bailim as well, that the Gemara says in the end when we're trying to prove what happens if I slaughter an animal for you, right? In other words, here we're talking about I slaughter one type of animal for another type of animal. What if I slaughter an animal for you? And the Gemara used an attempted to find a source that was also included in the Mishnah, even though the Mishnah didn't talk about it. Used the phrase V'nir tzalo lechaper alav. Right? Andrew was kind enough to send me a WhatsApp on Friday that said V'nir tzalo lechaper alav, which it says in the psukim in Vayikra, V'nir tzalo lechaper alav could mean one of two things, either V'nir tzalo or V'nir tzalo. It's not clear what V'nir tzalo means. But there's certainly some element of kapara in Olah, but it basically begs the question: what is the korban Olah? And what we began exploring last time was that maybe korban Olah actually is fundamentally different, or maybe similar. There's sources that go Lakanu. We started looking at some of those sources that seem to indicate that maybe an Olah is completely different korban than Chatat, Asha, maybe all the korban. Maybe Olah is different. First of all, Olah is like a standard, right? It's the first korban. It's the opening gambit, so to speak, of the Torah. But there are a number of sources, and so today I want to kind of go through them again. The first thing we saw, which we read last time, but I'll just look at it again for a moment, is the first chart you have on your thing, which is comparing basically the word kapara as appears in the Olah, as opposed to kapara that appears in Chatat. And I just want you to notice this because maybe I don't think last time I kind of just glossed over, but I want you to just notice in terms of the touch and feel of the word kapara. In Perek Aleph, where the Torah talks about, right, just remember the basic structure of Vayikra, right? We have Parshat Vayikra and Parshat Tzav. Parshat Vayikra is all the Korbanot. Parshat Tzav is a reiteration of pretty much all the Korbanot from the perspective of the Kohen. That's not my innovation or some, Herzog, modern literary, whatever. That's the Ramban says. It's obvious. Right, when you look at what is Parshat Tzav? Tzav et Aaron v'et banav le'mo zot Torah ta'olah. Oh, we're starting again, but Tzav et Aaron. Okay, it's not like I'm saying anything dramatic here. But in the first set of korbanot, so you'll remember we have Perek Aleph is Olah, Perek Bet is Mincha, Perek Gimel is Shlamim. Again, if you don't remember this, it's okay. It's okay, right? It's not like I'm doing anything sophisticated. I'm just reading the text, right? Perek Dalet is 4 or 5 different types of chatat because before you get to the average person's chatat, you have the chatat nasi and the chatat, right? The chatat kohen. You have all sorts of chatat. So I want to just compare the standard chatat in chapter 4, where it's the Israelites. Relationship to korbanot. Again, remember, korbanot we have in Kain ve'Hevel. We have korbanot in the Mishkan in chapter 27 of Shemot, but the real korbanot section is Vayikra. So if you just look at the Sukkim, you will get the sense that there's already a dialectic in the way we treat the Olah from the beginning. Listen to the beginning. Chapter 1, V'samach yado al rosh ha'olah v'nirtza lo, that's the obtuse phrase, lechaper Allah. Okay? Who's getting the kapara now? I assume the person, right? The individual. Looking now in the left side, which is the korban chatat, v'samach et yado al rosh ha'chatat, right? And then it doesn't say v'nirtza lo lechaper Allah when the kohen does, or when the kohen does your work for you in a korban chatat when you sinned. There are some comparisons in the same place. He takes the blood with his finger. Right? Not the mizbech is called the mizbech ha'olah, but you're doing the chatat on the mizbech ha'olah, which is fun. Like there's not a special mizbech for chatat. I grant you that. But the chatat looks like the olah, right? It's done in the same place. It's done on the mizbech ha'olah, but you paint the wall, the corners of the mizbech. Those are these four little horns, if you will, that stand up, right? The kranot. Having painted the corners of the mizbech ha'olah, you then dump all the blood at the yesod. There's a space in the yesod, right, which is the base of the mizbech. Right? The mizbech was not built like it wasn't just like a square or a box. It was built like on top of a box, and then it's not the dimensions aren't good, but there was a base around it. The original length was 28, and they added on another 4, 32. Okay, if you remember that. And then what does it say? After you dump the blood, vel kol chalba yasir kasher yusar chelev hakesev mizevach hashlamim. Where this comes forth, so we can already use the other ones as a reference point, right? Mm-hmm. Shlamim, which we talked about in chapter 3, right? You take off the chelev, unlike the olah. Why don't you take off the chelev in the olah?
Nothing happens. Nothing gets taken off.
Right, nothing gets taken off in the olah because everything gets offered on the olah except for the skin. No, the interior, of course, gets offered. The skin gets peeled off. We what's it called? We flay the animal. Is that the right word? We flay the animal and give the skin to the kohanim. Okay, that's like a side. That's not really part of the olah. That's not really part of the korban. Okay, so bet kol chalba v'chatat yatzir kasher yusar chelev hakesev mizevach hashlamim v'ktir oto hakohen v'ktir hakohen otam mizbecha al yishei Hashem on the fire of God. V'chiper alav hakohen al chatato asher chatam v'nislach lo. Oh, this is super interesting. The kapara only comes later. It doesn't come at the smicha point. It comes at the right after sprinkling the blood and when the offering happens. Right, that's very fascinating. So that already raises the question: is the kapara, even though there might be some dimension of kapara, right? There might be, I don't know, but if there is a dimension of kapara in the olah, it's certainly different than the kapara of the chata. Right, the kapara of the olah comes at the time of the smicha, as opposed to the kapara of the olah, which comes at the time of the sacrifice itself. Did I get it right? I said it backwards? I said it right? I said it right. Okay. So you see that already in the psukim, there's kind of a dialectic. We're not exactly sure what the olah is. The chatat is like the olah, right? It's done by makom sheish chatat olah. It's done on the mizbeach olah, but on the other hand, it's got a whole different, again, I'm trying to accentuate the difference, but it's got a whole different dimension of olah, of kapara. And we want to explore that. So one way to look at this is to look at through the lens of the Sifra. We reported the Sifra on the Ramban last time, but I want to read the Sifra. That's the Tannaitic material on Vayikra, and the Sifra basically sees the olah as part of a continuum. Take a look at this, the Sifra, which is the text number, the 5th text on the page. The Sifra says as follows. Again, the way to explore this is what's the scope of olah. In other words, for what do you bring in olah? That's one thing. We discussed that last time. And the Sifra already raises this question. Vineyard Salo, the Sifra asked the question, okay, the olah is meant to provide goodness for you. Let's say he takes it for the you. For God. Melamed shamakom rotzelo, God provides, rotzeh doesn't mean want. It means, I think what it means is God is like forgiving you to some extent. Va'ama amakom rotzelo. So here the Sifra goes way out into left field. Something that we didn't see in any of the Rishonim last time, right? Im Tomar, the Sifra is willing to entertain the possibility that an olah is shechayavim alea mitad beitin, mita bidei shamayim, karet bidei shamayim, malkot arba'im, right? Chataot v'ashamot. Maybe the olah is wrote nirtza for all these other things that you have to do other things for, things that you would get killed for, like murder, right? Things that you would get mita b'dei shamay, like stealing when the person didn't know. Things like karet, things like you get malkot for, things that you will also be chayv achata. In other words, this is some sort of uber korban. In addition to, right, in other words, all those other punishments, you also have to bring an olah in order to get in God's favor. But again, what's interesting for me is not that you'd have to bring an olah in addition to a chatat, or that an olah.
Is the olah then taking care of your obligation for the chatat, or
It's not clear to me, right? Not clear to me. Maybe the sifra is even going that far, right? In other words, the sifra is going to that, right? And it says Hare an shanamur, but the sifra says that can't possibly be because the Torah already told you what the onesh is, right? I.e., karet mita chatat asham, whereas those are all onshin. V'amal makom ratzelo, and then the Gemara. So then they say al mitzvot aseh v'mitzvot l'teshes yesh makom aseh, which is what Rashi says on the Torah. So you were going back to the Dot Skani, right? Who says like it's all these things that you never figured out, right? You never figured out, right? The chatat you're chayiv because there's shgaga, right? You knew that something was usher, you forgot it, and then you found out that you did it afterwards, right? You wrote on Shabbos, you forgot that writing on Shabbos was usher, then you bring a chatat. This is right. Then maybe you never knew, right? It could be that's what he's saying, but it could be the sifra is the most extreme formulation. At least there's a havamina. You'd have to do it in addition, or in place of, even better. Jeff is saying even more radical, right? The sifra is actually entertaining the possibility that you could bring a chatat, or you could get killed, or you could just bring an olah, and then you'd be done. Right. That would be the most extreme formulation. So that raises the possibility. Again, Rashi, we saw last time, we saw a number of approaches, right? Rashi says in the Torah that it's aseh v'lo taseh. We saw machloket in the Gemara and Yoma, whether it's on leket, chicha, and peah, or on asehs and lav hanita klases. We tried to explore a little bit about lav hanita klases in terms of the scope. In other words, when do you bring a korban olah? Is it for a sin? If it's for a sin, so we, again, just to put it to organize it, we have the sifras havamina, that it's even for chataats and all those things with onshin. And then they say, no, it's asehs and lav hanita klases, and that's what Rashi al Torah says, right? But we have a havamina that's a little more crazy. Right, the Dot Skani says what we heard a moment ago. L'chaper alav ki k'shadam ochel chelev b'shogeg mevi chatat v'alasafek asham talui. Right, you with me? Mm-hmm. Right, but lifamim sover b'vadai shachal shuman. Right, you're certain you did the right thing. Right, what did I say last time? I give the example of you ate in the kosher McDonald's. Mm-hmm. You're sure you went to the kosher McDonald's. You remember that when you were here for the year, the McDonald's on Ben Yehuda was kosher or whatever, Hillel Street. Right, so you remember that. So you're sure you had. And you never find out that, in fact, it lost its hashgacha years ago and it's no longer kosher, right? I'm looking at your faces to see, like, okay, who's eating there last year? So, lefamim sefer b'vaday shachal shuman v'uachal chelev. Oh, you really messed up, right? Va'alav ha'olam mechaperet mashalo yadal le'olam, right? In olah's mechaper not on asehs and lav hanita asehs, but right. But things you never find out about. In other words, an olah it's an uber korban jet, but in a different way. It's the korban for things you'll never know that you did. Right? The Ramban quotes the Agadah Vayikra Ramba Tani Rabbi Shimon Yochai Ein olah ba'al el harurei avera avera talev. Right? And then he quotes a pasuk Halel ruchachem. Right? So it might be asehs and lav hanita asehs. It might be things you never find out about. It might be just your alev. So last time we tried to think about this a little, right, in terms of what the scope is, not just does this reflect the dialectic as well? I wanted to add to this. Yeah, go ahead. In other words, go ahead.
Did the Rambam and the Baal Zkenim, are they operating from? Surely they're not operating from ignorance of what
the Gemara said about aseh v'lo
received, like how we paskin when the olah was brought. Are these like theoretical?
Yes, I think these are theoretical. But in other words, you're saying if someone didn't hold a lulav, would they make them make an aseh or not? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So right, or is it only here or alev? The truth is, I don't know. I don't know enough. Are they saying it's to the exclusion of those things, or I don't know. I'm not clear, but it's clear that they want to pin it down at some point. He says The Ramban is clearly theoretical.
Mhm.
The Dats Kainim, I'm not 100% sure. It sounds like he's saying that olah is that you just show up and bring. Would we do that? I don't think there's an.
I guess what I'm saying is that when we learned Bava Batra, it's about that. Like there's 2,000 years of continuous people doing
things.
and there's like Beit Dinim that are paskening, and
Right.
we know what the halacha is. Does the Rama actually know what the halacha, like what the received
Right.
halacha was for how the Beit
So-
HaMikdash operated?
Right. So I don't know. That's a good question. Okay, it's a fair question. I should think about that more. Okay. What we did see, so again, in terms of the scope, we have a pretty wide scope here. Right. Now I'm also not 100% clear about that. Okay. And if you want to just see the scope widen just a little bit, there's another Tosfot that I wanted to just show you. There's a Tosfot in Yoma, which is like on the, I don't know what page, I guess on the second page towards the end, where on Daf Lamed Vav, where the Tosfot in Yoma goes a little farther. And again, I want to try to think about this now. And raise the question, Tosfot says, wait, why are olas only for aseis and lav anita klaseis? Why don't we include other lota aseis that aren't covered, or aseis that aren't covered by anything else? Lo yadana my lo kachashiv kol lavi de lo laki alayu. But Tosfot says, if the ola is supposed to be like the basket for everything that isn't covered by the asham and the chatan, so then there's all sorts of other things that you don't necessarily bring a korban, right? A korban for. For example, which you wouldn't even get makot for, like lav shebechlalot or lav she'ein bo maaseh. Okay, what are those two things? Just very quickly, just to remind you, lav shebechlalot is when you have one pasuk that has like 5 different interpretations of it. Merib Psachim, lo tochlu al hadam, right? What is lo tochlu al hadam? Do you know what that means? Right? Lo tochlu means, it can either mean the Beit Din is not allowed to eat on the day that they convict someone, right? Or it can mean don't eat the korban while the dam hasn't been spilled yet. But it can mean 2 different things that are totally 2 different worlds altogether, right? That's the classic example of lav shebefal. We learn from one klal a whole bunch of different things. Because of that, because we learn a whole bunch of things from it, it's kind of like a lesser quality lav, and because of that, we don't get makot for it, or you don't bring a korban for it. So if the Beit Din eats, even though it's a lota, say if the Beit Din eats on the day that they convict someone,
Which application?
I don't want to give too much svara because there's obviously multiple, it's a whole shiur of what a lav shebechal is, but let's just say in general it's a lower quality lav because it's not directed, it's not laser focused like lo tirtach or lo tignov, right? It's not right. It's lo tachlo adam, which can mean 5 different things, right? So Tosfos says you don't bring a chatat for that. It's a lotas. Say you violated the lotas. Say you don't bring a chatat for it. So it says, so why shouldn't the olah cover that? Or it's, if you're already including aseis or lav hanita aseis, like stealing because you can return it, because that's a lower quality lav, so why don't include this? Right? Or, says Tosfos, or the other one, lav shein bo maaseh. Lav shein bo maaseh, we all remember, right? What's a lav shein bo maaseh? You do a lotase by not doing anything. Like, I really, really like your Ferrari. Right? That's lo tachmod. Right? I didn't do anything. I don't get makot for it. Right? I don't get makot. I don't bring a chata for it. If I lotas, I didn't do a chata. So Tosfos says, if you're going to include aseis and lota aseis, hanita aseis, should include lav shebechlalot or include lav shein bo maaseh. So there's 2 ways to respond to Tosfos' question. What are the ways to respond to Tosfos' question? You can either say there's something unique about aseis and lav hanita aseis. Those are really low quality lavim, and they're going to require an olah. Or you can say, right, it's telling you something about the lav hanita asei and the asei. We can tell you something about olah. That's already what I'm interested in. It's talking about olah that can only respond to aseis and lav hanita aseis, not because of what olah is, and that's what I want to kind of flesh out here today. Forgive me for saying that. I don't want to carve it out. But what do I want to talk about? What is an olah? What happens in korban olah that's different? So again, the scope might be just on hirurei aveira, or the scope might be on much more than that. Right? The scope might be just lav hanita aseis and aseis, or it might be lavsha, anything that isn't covered by any other korban. That's basically what Tosfos is saying. Why isn't everything else that isn't covered by a korban? Right? Is, to put it in the most conceptual terms I can right now, and I'll show you this in a minute, is an olah part of the continuum of you have asha, you have chatat, and then you have olah. Whereas it's all part of, that's that second line of Tosfos. So let's include everything else. Or no. is an olah not part of the continuum of korban. It's a totally different type of korban. What is it? So here we already saw a phrase that we explored last time, but we're going to try to explore it a little more. That's the first Gemara on the page. Amar Rava on Daf Zayin Amud Bet. Amar Rava. So I'm using the scope of the olah to try to explore what its character is. Right? Amar Rava, olah doronhu. Right? I'm very happy to use the phrase doron. Why am I happy to use the phrase doron today? Why did I bring this more up today? Parshat Shavua. What's Parshat Shavua? These coming weeks? Vayishlach. What's the first thing that happens in Vayishlach? He sent him 3 things. Right? Doron is one of them. Right? So what is doron again? We saw last week the Ramban. What would I call? Cannibalizes this phrase. He doesn't like this. The Ramban is very, very uncomfortable. Right? The Ramban is going to be the poster child of one theory. The Rambam is going to be the poster child of the other theory, and then we're going to find a theory in the middle. But the Rava basically says an olah is a gift. Hechi dami, says the Rava. Ida leka tshuva. You can't bring a gift if you didn't do tshuva. Zevach v'shayim toeva. Bring a korban is disgusting, right? You're a rasha. V'deika tshuva. Hatanya aval mitzvat aseh v'shav. Lo zazmi shamat shemochalin lo. You remember that from Gemara and Yoma and Daf Tevav, right? If you do a mitzvah, if you violated an aseh, right? You didn't pick up a lulav, and then you said, "Yeah, here, you didn't pick up a lulav in the morning," and then in the afternoon you go, "Damn, I was such an idiot." And then you go pick up a lulav, so God forgives you. You don't need to bring a korban, right? Apropos what you said a few minutes ago, what happened to Benamit? You don't need to bring everyone. You did tshuva for naseh. Elashma mina doronhu. Oh, this is a Abdu's phrase. Right? You can't beat this phrase for a good phrase. By the way, the Gemara, the first Rashi in this week's parsha is using this Gemara. It's a doron, it's a gift. That's what. But again, we don't know exactly what kind of gift, right? Tanya Rabbi Shimon chatat lama ba lechaper. Ela lama ba lifnei olah. Why does a chatat come lifnei olah? For instance, you have 2 in front of you. For example, the woman who gives birth has to bring a chatat and an olah. She'll always bring the chatat first. Why? Lepraklit shenichnas. Right? The lawyer comes in, the lawyer makes a deal, right? He goes out, then you bring in the, right? You can't, and it's explicit. So the question is, what do you do with this Gemara? Right? If you believe that the olah is a continuum of the other things, this Gemara is very hard to imagine, right? The Gemara here seems to draw a very, very, very strong, hard stop, right? First you have to get kapara, and then you give the olah. So the olah is not for kapara at all. Asay, and then we have a problem. So what are asays and lavanita classes? But you're never going to get the tosas especially because we're not going to want to lop on more isurim. We're going to want to make it less, right? We have to explain why lavanita classay. Maybe asay we can understand. We'll come back to that in a couple minutes, right? Same thing with the sifra. If you take this Gemara seriously, if you take Rava seriously, that the olah is a doron, then you'll never entertain the possibility that it's the uber korban instead of, right, in the replacement for chatad or makod or any of those things. The sifra, whereas the sifra is in total opposition to Rava, right? You follow what I'm saying? The sifra's havamina is one side of the coin, right? And Rava is the other side of the coin. Nichnas, right? Yeah, it says nichnas praklit, right? Ritzah praklit, nichnas doron, right? I couldn't say it better, right? Ritzah, right? By the way, ritzah is nirtzalo, right? Nirtzalo, mechaper Allah, right? Now, that's done now. Right, but that I don't know how it happens.
I mean,
right, it'll be more in the world of korban toda,
and
it'll be more in the world of
ever obligated to bring,
and not something you're necessarily obligated to bring. Yafeh. So here, so again, right,
the words nirtzalo.
Correct. The words nirtzalo, the chaper Allah, he's going to have to minimize that. Now he can't, as Danny pointed out, he can't ignore. But let me do a 2-step. I got 3 things. Okay, the next 3 things are. Number 1, the Rambam's formulation of what an olah is. Number 2, the issue of the ases and lotases, the vidui, and then the 3, which is one of the main texts I want to get to today, which is the Rambam and Ramban about korban in general. Like we finally got there after 12 classes, right? Michael's very excited, right? So, right, we finally got to the introduction to korban after 12 classes, right? Now, why we bring korban. But so let's do that in order. So the first one is, right, what did I say I want to do first? Is the Rambam formulates it, right? So here I pointed out last time, and I want to contrast it to the Ramban, right? So this is the bottom chart on the first page. I'm sorry, I'm going a little out of order. I just didn't have time to put things in place. Okay, so when the Rambam talks about smicha, he says as follows: Ketzad somech imaya koron kodesh kodesh. You see where I am on the right hand side, the right column. Imaya koron kodesh kodeshim mamidov v'tzafanu panav v'marav v'somech v'min marav v'minech shtei yadav v'deshtei karatov v'mitvadeh. Al chatat avon chatat. Al asham avon asham. Al olah avon olah. No, he doesn't say that, right? Al olah mitvadeh avon aseh avon lo taseh shenital klaseh. Words. You understand? It's not like there is no avon olah. It isn't, because the olah is not part of the continuum, according to the Rambam. It's clear, right? And as I pointed out last time, Rabbi Rosenzweig even felt like this was more compelling because the Rambam, he thinks the Rambam is already waffling at this point. The Rambam is very uncomfortable with this, because in the next halacha he says, "Ketzad mitzvah yomer chadati aviti pashati vasiti kach v'kach v'chazarti b'tshuva lefanecha v'zoka parati haya korban shlamim somech b'kol makom shiur." It says, of course, you do smicha for a shlamim as well. Mina hazar, you can do it any place in the hazar. Says the Rambam, it seems to me sheino mitzvah al shlamim, aval omer divrei shevach. So Rabbi Rosenzweig said he felt, again, I think you'd say the other way, but he felt like the Rambam already in Olah is already not sure about how you can say zo kaparati. He's not, but he says it in words. You can't say zo kaparati in shlamim. That's clear. He felt like that already goes back on the fact that the Rambam was already, the pen was already shaking when he wrote the words al olah, right? But that is in clear contrast to a comment the Ramban makes in the Sefer Mitzvah. What do I mean by Sefer Mitzvah? So you remember the Rambam wrote a Sefer Mitzvah just outside for a minute, and the Ramban, right, in the beginning of the Sefer Mitzvah, the Rambam has 14 rules by which he gets to the counting of the 613. The counting of the 613 was not such a big deal in the times of Chazal. It does appear in the Gemara Megillah, but it wasn't such a big deal. Like, not everybody was obsessed with counting 613. You get to the medieval period, everybody's counting 613, right? Everybody's got their own list. Right? The Chinuch, you're right, it relates to the Rambam. But the Ramban, we've pointed to that many, many times. The Ramban kicks out a whole bunch, about 20-something mitzvot, and then he has to add something. Right? Over the years, we've read that. In this case, I wanted to introduce a new type of text, which is the Ramban, in order to set up the Rambam for. Should I just bring the book for a second? Okay, I got you that as well.
I think you do it afterwards, so it doesn't look like a flag.
Yeah, once your slate is clean, now you can give a gift to show thank you.
Right, so it doesn't make a flag. If you give it beforehand, it'll say a flag.
Yes.
So, Mosar Rav Kook,
Right, getting back into
as you know, Mosar Rav Kook put out a copy of the Rambam's thing. So this is the Frankel edition. This is the Frankel edition of the Sefer HaMitzvot, right? Frankel was a banker who lived in Jerusalem who wrote a critical edition of the Rambam, right? He used all the manuscripts except for the Geniza.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was very hard for the Haredi community to accept that Geniza fragments were like an important source for the Rambam. So this thing is awesome. It's still the best thing to be used, but it's lacking because we have Geniza texts from the Mishnah Torah, which are different. Because it's an academic thing.
It didn't come from like a Masorah?
Right, exactly. So, but okay. What? Well, now you have a much easier thing because there's stuff online that's, incorporates everything. And Friedberg, from Toronto, they spent a lot of money to get all this stuff, organized much better. Anyway, the Rambam at the beginning has, when you get to the Sefer HaMitzvot, so this is a book of the Sefer HaMitzvot, but the Sefer HaMitzvot, right, when you get to Mitzvah Aseh, so Mitzvah Aseh number 1 starts on page here in this thing, starts on page 207. Okay, that's all I need to say, right? Why does it start on page 207? Because before that, the Rambam has 14 roots, sharashim, by which he's going to tell you the rules by which he counts the mitzvah. So not only does the Ramban, right, at the end of any volume of the Sefer Mitzvah, you will find, right, the Ramban again, 1200, right, the Rambam dies in 1204, the Ramban is born in 1180, let's assume, maybe 1200, 1180. So, and he's writing afterwards. So he has, at the end of the Sefer HaMitzvot, you have like along the way in the Sefer HaMitzvot, the Ramban criticizes everyone. So on, says you shouldn't count this one, you shouldn't count this one, right? And then in the end, he adds things like we should count charging goyim for ribit as a mitzvah aseh, right? That's one he counts, right? We should count that. The Rambam doesn't count that. So, but in the Shorashim also, no, okay, he has all sorts of others. Again, I have all sorts of, right? No, it's again, I'm just, right now, I just don't have a good enough memory to remember which one's like one of the famous ones that he counts. That's a famous one. that he counts. But at the end, like he has a list of all the. I'm just quickly looking to see. Here, Shichachat Alavim Ledat Rambam, right? He says, right. The fourth one is the Rambam didn't count slaughtering the animal in a korban, or to put the kelim in the mikdash in order. Okay, there's the most famous commentator on here, and the reason we know this is a commentator called the Megillat Esther that defends the Rambam against the Rambam's criticism. How come we know it? Because he's the one who says that the Rambam really believed that Yishuv Eretz Yisrael was a mitzvah. That's what they taught us when we were here for the year. Like, how can the Rambam not count it? And the Ramban, there's one. The Ramban does count mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael as a mitzvah. We should all know that one, right? The Megillat Esther says, no. The Rambam meant it as like overarching mitzvah. It wasn't whatever. He defends the Rambam. Okay, all this is by introduction because at the beginning in the Shorashim, right, in the Shorashim of the Rambam, which are also 207 pages, like the Rambam just has a description of what he counts. I don't count, let's say, Shorish number 4, which is the one we're going to discuss for a moment, because I don't count parts of mitzvah as mitzvah, right? So the question becomes, are olah, shlamim, chatat, are those one mitzvah, 4 mitzvah? Like, what happens there, right? So in that context, which I don't read the whole thing, but I'm sorry, so the 4th, it's the 12th, I apologize. So in Shorish Yud Bet, the Ramban says, "Ha'ikar shnei masar yadun bo arav dinim, amar she'ein ra'ui she'imnu chelkei melachot kol echad chelek v'chelek mehen." You shouldn't count each one, each detail, right? Bifnei atzmo. V'chein sam shem torat kol min v'min min hakorbanot. Oh, you shouldn't count each one, each korban. Mitzvah echad b'minyan, right? In other words, you should only count one mitzvah. Ma'aseh olah u'ma'aseh chatat u'ma'aseh asha u'ma'aseh zevach hashlamim u'ma'aseh mincha 5 mitzvot. Okay, vidui od, v'yadin od she'ot hakohen lokeh. Okay, so he says basically these are not, since these have different shemot, they're counted as different mitzvot. That's the way I think the Rambam counts. I'm pretty sure. What's important is the Ramban, kind of like on the way, lists them all as a continuum. But he doesn't say olah is different. Right? In other words, I'm just using this as a contrast. In other words, this is different. You could have said, if to the extent that olah is a doron, you could have said, oh, that's a totally different category. But he does see them all as a continuum, right? So it could be that's a contrast to the Rambam. That's all. That's the only point I wanted to bring out in the Shorashim. Just by listing them all like that, maybe it's not very compelling. What I'm saying now, it doesn't sound right. I agree. I agree. It didn't come out as well as I thought it was going to come out at that point. Okay, so we can forget that point. We can scratch that. We can scratch that from the record. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is the Rambam. Let's talk about the poster children first, and then we'll come back to the Gemara and Yoma. So it could be that the extent to which olah is part of the continuum of korbanot, or it's a totally separate thing, it's a doron, could be part of the debate, not the full debate, between the Rambam and the Ramban on the most basic question about what korbanot are. What do I mean by that? So here, let's just look at the text because it's an opportunity to look at the text. This is the last text on the pages you have in front of you. We'll read it somewhat quickly, but you will remember, in other words, again, this is what they teach you, this is what they teach every kid at the beginning of korbanot, this is what we remember every year in the beginning of whatever, but this is the text, right? The Ramban says, right, korbanot, and their purpose that they are, pleasant for God. Amar Rav b'Moreh Nevuchim, right? The Rambam has 3 books in the Moreh Nevuchim. Chapters 40 in the 3rd book and onward are all about the Tamei Mitzvot, right? That's like a whole substrata of study in Rambam studies, Maimonidean studies, right? How it is, explanations for mitzvah, and to what extent did he take them seriously? To what extent did he not? Was he just speaking to the Amcha? Why does he write more of them in the Moreh Nevuchim in Arabic than he writes in the Mishnah Torah? Right? There's not like a small literature. That's probably some of the biggest literature about Maimonidean thought. So the Rambam writes, I think you all know this. I think maybe you never read it in this text, but I think you all know this. The Rambam writes, right? The Jews lived in Egypt and they lived in Arabia. They would worship cattle. Right? They would worship idols. They would worship demons that appeared to them as goats. Everybody knows that in India they don't slaughter animals at all. They right? The Ram says that's why these are the korbanot, right? This you know, right? Right? That's what we do to right? כדי שיוודע כי הדבר שהיו חושבים כי הם בתכלית העבירה הוא אשר יקריבו לבורא. The thing that you thought was the worst, that ends like we end up dedicating it to God. ובו יתכפרו עוונות. Oh, so he says you're also going to have kapara. כי כן יתרפו האמונות הרעות שהם מעצבי הנפש, right? That's how you. We're doing a tikkun for the world by offering sacrifices to God. They do it for Avodah Zarah, we do it. Right? You have to do, right? This is what we call a antidote. That's an antidote. He says it. Right? The antidote to what the Indians do and what the Arabians did and what the Mitzrim did is we offer sacrifices. Okay, he says they're basically nothing. They're worthless, what the Rambam says. Right? He fixes or he heals a terrible crisis and a very, very difficult question very simply. Right? He offers a simple answer to a complex question. That's what he's basically saying, right? Yasu shulchan Hashem megoal. Right? He makes God's table disgusting. All it is to counter, it's an antidote. Like that's what God wants. That's reich nichach. That's possibly reich nichach. Right? Again, we could do more into this, but this is fascinating, right? So Vagam, okay, then he continues, he attacks it, right? He starts going through historical examples. Maybe we shouldn't spend the time to reading it because I want to get to some other story, right? So skip the next two paragraphs. So read them on your own if you want. But he says it can't possibly be. That's what the reason of korbanot are. After all, Noach were from korbanot, and he didn't know any Egyptians, right? His son was here. That's not possible. So v'yoter ra'ui. So what's the Ramban's theory? What's his thesis? This I assume you remember, right? The Ramban is going to be the poster. So let's put it this way, right? The Rambam is again
against korbanot.
What? It's essentially against korbanot, right? But what are korbanot for? Again, so the korbanot in general are for fixing what they did, but the dimensions of sorry, just 1 second. Well, let's read the Ramban, and then I'll come back to it. Okay, right? This is a reason that people say, which is more reasonable. People mess up either by speaking, thinking, or acting. When you sin, you have to do a korban. You do smicha to contrast or to counter your bad actions. You do confession for the sins of speech. And then you burn the innards because those are your innards are what causes you to either think badly or desire badly, right? It's lo tachmod, etc. You offer the legs because your hands and your feet ran to sin. Right? Because of your blood. You really sinned, and here the Ramban says it. Again, you learned this when you were in 6th grade. Right? Okay, so the Ramban is clearly the poster child for kaparas, right? It was the olah, right? Because what does the Ramban put in the front of his korbanot? Look what he says now. The kippur korbanot says she had damot tachat damot nefesh tachat nefesh. Roshev rav korban can get Roshev rav amanot lachayopo morea Torah shitpalu alav. Oh, now he says it. This is the part that I should have underlined. Everything else is secondary. The korban tamid bavur shelo yinatzlu harabim michtot tamid. What's the korban tamid, folks? No. Because everybody sins all the time. The Ramban is basically like the Ramban is a religious leader of the of the fire and brimstone type, right? Living in Barcelona. I'm not saying that. I didn't say that, right? But he's living under Christianity, and he clearly, right, has a similar thrust. A person is a sinner by
lots of sinning,
I think, and therefore
Man is born in sin.
and therefore what? Therefore, every single day you basically should be on the thing. And what kind of korban is the korban tamid, Danny? It's an olah.
So it does.
Yeah. In other words, I know that it's only for you mentioned hirurim, and I know he meant right. And I know it's only ases not ases, but fundamentally, the korban olah is the most prominent dimension of the kapara. On the other hand, the Rambam We don't know. The truth is there's not enough evidence. That's why I didn't want to start with the Rambam before. I stuttered before because I don't know if the Rambam believes it's a Doron in the Rava sense, that it's just a Doron after Nichnas HaProfit. But the Ramban, in the face of Rava, right? Much more like the Sifra, right? That this is the Ur Korban. This is the ultimate, right? Every single day you should be putting your body on the altar. But we can't do that. God gave us a gift. Not that I shouldn't use that word. God gave us a replacement, right? Of whatever. So this the most fundamental question about korbanot, about what is korbanot, might be our question about what is an olah. Is an olah doron like Rava, or is it a doron? Or is an olah part of the continuum of korbanot where you're? But again, why? Right? The sifra is the best expression of it. Yeah. Question.
No, I was thinking through Yom Kippur, which
Yeah.
this should be the most important korban given on Yom Kippur. If that's the case.
The olah.
The
You're saying it's supposed to be the chata. Right. We have the topic. You have the topic. Okay. You have some other expressions of this as well. I do want to talk. I want to talk about three more. I don't know if we'll get to them all today. Okay. One is the Gemara about bundling. What do I mean about bundling? So here there's a Gemara on the Vav. There's a Rashi. One sec. You know what? Before I do that, the Ramban mentioned, or we saw one source that mentioned which comes first, right? The Chatat comes before, right? The Rava says the Chatat comes before the Olah. Because it's aprakli. Let's go to Daf Peitet for a minute. The Gemara on Daf Peitet. Okay, let's do that first. There in the Gemara, this is like Zvachim 101, right? The Gemara there talks about Tadir V'Sheno Tadir Kodem. Right? This is the Gemara on Daf Peitet. Says the Gemara, Kol Tadir Mechavera Kodem Et Chavero. Tmidim, every korban tamid, kodem lemusafin. Right? I don't know if you knew that. That's important to know. Right? You always do korban tamid, kodem musaf. Musfei Shabbat, kodem musfei Yom Rosh Chodesh. Right? That's in your musaf of Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. You'll notice that. Right? Musfei Rosh Chodesh, kodem musfei Rosh Hashanah. Shneimar mivada lot hadabogar shel tamid tasu et eila. Then the Gemara, the Mishnah says, the next Mishnah on Peitet Amud Aleph at the bottom, kodem mekadosh michavero, kodem et chavero. Okay, whichever is more kadosh. Dam chata, kadam ladam ola. Bimnei shu meratzeh. Oh, that's an interesting statement. Right. So much for Andrew's v'nirtzalo, right? Dam chata is right. The Gemara simply wiped out the nirtzalo of the ola, right? Right. Then the Gemara goes through things. Evarei ola kadam lamir chatat meshu kalila ashim. Right. In other words, this is the important part for me. What's unique about ola? Or what's unique about chatat? It's meratzeh. What's unique about ola? That it's all up, right? Kalila Ashim, right? That's an important statement. In other words, the unique, when the Gemara is trying to identify the unique dimension of Ola or the unique dimension of Chatat is Mechaper, and Ola is consumed. The Gemara then asks, look at the Gemara on the bottom, right? The Gemara says, Ibailu, Dam Ola ve'imure Chatat, Ezemahim Kodem. Dam Ola Kodem tekaati mikoach Kalil. Whereas does Dam Ola come first because it's totally offered? Or this Gemara, what does this Gemara basically do? It suppresses the kapara of Ola. Yeah. Right? You understand that? That's all I wanted to say. This Gemara suppresses the kapara of Ola. Or it either, so you could say the kapara of Chatat is greater. You could say that. Or you can say the kapara of Ola is just not significant. Right? You understand? You see that? No, it's just as soon as the Gemara has right the best besides this scope, there's a clash sometimes. Which one comes first? So which one comes first? Right? Is it the holocausto that comes first, or is it the mechaper that comes first? So that's another dimension where you could test it. What about the next thing? This is totally fascinating. Do I force someone to give an olah or give a chata? What do I mean by that? So here there's a fascinating Gemara. Where is it? I haven't made it on the page. Yeah. The Gemara in Bava Kama, as opposed to the Gemara in Bava Batra and the Tosfot there. And here we'll introduce the third possibility. Okay? So there's a Gemara in Bava Kama that says, this is on the top of page 2, I guess. There's a little 2 boxes. Bava Kama Dafman. Chai ve'erchin b'mashkin oto. If you made an oath, right, I'm going to give my value to the temple, so my value is 50 shekel or whatever it is, they can go and make a lien on my bank account, right? They can take a lien on my bank account until I pay up, right? They can just take a mashkon. The court. If I owe a chata, the court doesn't, right? And I haven't brought it yet, right? I can't pledge a chata.
Oh, right.
I can't pledge a chata. I violated a lotase, right? The court obligated me in a chata. The court came and said, you drove on Shabbat. I said, I forgot it was Shabbat. They said, well, today's Sunday, or today's Monday, 2 days ago was Shabbat. Oh, shoot. Okay, so now I'm chayav a chata, right?
Yeah.
Great. If I haven't brought it in the first week, the court goes to my bank account and takes $2,000 out of my bank account to pay for the cow. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
What about an olah?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not clear. This Gemara says, you don't have mashkin achata. Okay? Bava Batra, what Danny quoted before, has another discussion. This is the left column. Famous Gemara. We studied it, I don't know how many years ago, probably 10 years ago already, Bava Batra. We should go back and do those Gemaras again because they're so much fun. Right? Amar Rav Huna, Sla'u v'zavin. This is, Joe loved this at the time. Sla'u v'zavin zvina zvina. You remember this? If I hang you up and I put a gun to your head and I say, sell me your car, and you sell it to me, it's a valid sale. Okay? Did I violate an Isser? That's a Machloket Rambam and Ramban. Oh, right. Whether I violated an Isser by doing that. But the sale is valid. Okay? Meaning that if you refuse to pay up, the court can come in and take your thing, right? What's the source for Tlau v'zavin zvina zvine? Right? That's like a technical term, like in the yeshiva. Tlau v'zavin, right? Okay, because everybody does that all the time, right? This is the mafia, right? We don't steal it from you. We just make you sell it to me because I want it. My daughter wants it. I don't know, my son-in-law is marrying an Italian girl, and you want whatever it is, So. Okay, so how do you know it? Where it says, maybe we can learn it from the world of korbanot. It says, yakrivoto, melamid shekofinoto. Right? When someone offers a sacrifice, we force you to give the sacrifice. Yachol bal korcho, maybe we can force you to give it against your will. Talmud lomar l'tzono. Has to be brought l'tzono. Haketzad. Kofin lo achiyom rotzani. So the famous text that you're familiar with from the world of Gittin, also in the world of korbanot. We force korban.
Force you to want it.
We force you to want to give a korban. Correct. And then you give the korban out of your free will. So Tess says Tosfos, Tess says, these two sources seem to contradict each other. Mm-hmm. Right? One source says, we ain't memashkinin l'chatat v'asham. One source says, kofin lo achiyom rotzani. We force you to give a korban if you dedicated it.
The mashkin,
Ain't memashkin means we. Why wouldn't we be mashkin?
That's not forcing you to do something.
No,
that's doing it to you.
Right. We assume you're going to do it yourself. We don't have to get involved. We assume it's erchin. You made a commitment that you're going to give your value.
Yeah.
Then we push you to do it.
Is it possible that one is taking the lien out when you should have just done the action about the korban, and here we're talking about specifically coconut to do a korban?
So you could go that direction. Is this what Jeff and Danny are both pointing out? Is that this is not exactly the same language. Coconut and memashkinoto are two different tools of the court. Right, one tool of the court is kofin law. Right, we beat you up. We send the charedim in to beat you up in the middle of the night. And memashkinoto is we call the repo man. Right. Okay. So Tosfot doesn't go that way. What does Tosfot say? So Tosfot says something interesting. Right. Tosfot says lo dami lahadam beperek shor shenaga charav v'chamisha. The Gemara Bava Kam that I just said, right? So let's say the Ritva comes up with a different answer. The Ritva says, I didn't bring it here because the text wasn't so good for me it wasn't easy to read. But the Ritva says there's a basic difference between the two sugyas. One, they're two different ukimtas. One is if I dedicated the animal and I refused to give it. One is before I dedicated the animal at all. Before I dedicate the animal at all, right? Once I dedicated the animal, then there's no reason to get involved anymore. It's obvious that I'm on my way. Okay? What does Tosfot do? Tosfot do something that fits in beautifully into what we're doing here. What does Tosfot say? Oh, Tosfot says, when am I not mimashkin you? When does the court not get involved? Again, I accept that the Gemara's terminology is not the same, and maybe these two things aren't the same, but once Tosfot asked the question, so then I'm on good footing to say, like, we can And Tosfos' chiluk is interesting. What does Tosfos say? So it doesn't say it's after you dedicated or before you dedicated. It says it depends on which korban you're talking about. Tosfos says, "En mashkinoto." When don't we get involved? Mishum the the kapara katu. Since these korbanot are coming for your kapara, lo by mashkune. I don't need to get involved. The court doesn't need to get involved because why do you bring a chatat? Heck, who's the chatat for? Right? The chatat is you can't move forward. You're going to get really punished if you don't bring a chatat. If you don't do tshuva and bring a chatat, you're going to be screwed. Right? The davka chataot va'ashamot shebal lachet lo ba'ishkilu mashkune shirotze beoto shemeoto chet yelo kapara. Right? Yeah, yafeh. Right? Ain't mamashmioto. It's not that we don't need to. That's what those are saying, right? We don't need to because you're going to get involved. Right? Aval hacha. But in Bava Batra, where we say, Kofin lo achiyom rotzani, neder nedava, eno mechaprin. Right? Okay, I don't need the next line for now. Right? He says, a neder nedava, which he assumes means an olah, right? Not a shlamim. He says that in the continuation, right? He says, he quotes, right? He even quotes, he says, and then why does the Gemara say, olah mechaperet al chavei aseh, ha'amar perakam etzachim, the olah doronu, below mechaperet. Right? And then he quotes some other line, which I'll get to in a few minutes, or I'll get to next time. So Tosfos differentiates between olah and chatar. What does he say? He says, in olah, I don't need to, right? One Gemara is talking about olah. In olah, that comes as a doron. There, dafko, you don't have any real incentive to do it because he's suppressing the kapara part again, right? No, he's saying the kapara is not the main part. When he's talking about a kapara, then we don't have to be involved at all. And mashkin, why bother? Right? So we have three ways to address this contradiction between the sources. Either they're not talking about the same thing, Jeff and Danny's way, or they're talking about the same thing, one's before Afrasha, one's after Afrasha, or Tosfos, we're differentiating between korbanot that come for kapara and korbanot that come for doron. Korbanot that come for doron. Even the doron korban has a vidui, right? So note that the Rambam, right? So how do we deal with that vidui? So the Rambam basically only quotes the kapara dimension of olah in the context of vidui, right? In other words, yes, there is some sort of korban going on, but there is some sort of kapara going on, but it's not that important. It's just because we have to do a vidui, right? So we have to have some sort of dimension of kapara, but it's not so significant. By the way, now I can come back to the beginning. If you believe that a korban olah is like Tosfos's thing, right? It's assays and lav anita assays and maybe lav shebeklal, or at least in the havamina, and lav, right? Lav shein bomase. You're obviously emphasizing the kapara dimension, right? You're saying it's for sins. What about hirurei avera? Right, the Ramban's explanation that it's only the scope is only the mechayiv is only hirurei avera. Or the mechayiv, if we make it very simple, is assays and lafanita assays because they're connected to assays. What can you say there? So you could say there's no kapara dimension, or maybe you could say a third option. In other words, until now, I've explored two options. One option is it has nothing to do with kapara; it's just a doron, right? Rava. The other option is no, it's just part of the continuum, right? On one hand, we have the Rambam, right? There's no such thing as an avon of olah, right? On the other hand, we have the Ramban. There is, it's part of the continuum. On one hand, we have the Ramban who says, you're the ultimate sinner. That's why you have to offer a korban, and that's why you offer a korban olah every day. Right? That korban olah is going on the doron, right? Then we have Tosfos who differentiates olah. Maybe you could say a third option, which is interesting. This Rabbi Rosenzweig suggests. I thought it was very clever. Again, he's building off of. He didn't say this when he taught this, but I know he's building off. He's building off of the Rav's thing in Ala Tshuva about what happens when you do kapara. Like, what is kapara? Or what is that? So the Rav talked about when you sin, two things happen. Okay, what happens? One is you've done a maaseh avera, which you have to atone for. You've done a sin that God finds objectionable in this world. What's the second thing that happens? You've sullied yourself, your person, the gavra. Right? You have become a gavra hachote. That happens every time you sin, pretty much, right? Certainly when I murder or steal or whatever. What happens when I don't do an assay? When I don't do an assay, So there's two ways to look at not picking up a lulav, right? Or not putting on tefillin, or whatever you would do. There's two ways of looking at it. One way is to say, just like I violated a lo ta'aseh by murdering, so I
Missed an opportunity.
that's the other way to say it.
That's it, that's the
The
second,
other way to say it is that assays are just opportunities.
just missed it.
Right. I just missed an opportunity. Right. No, I'm sure this is it's like I'm sure in the business world this is all the time. Like, is missed opportunity a loss? Right? Opportunity cost, right? Or it's just that's the question. That's the real question about chay.
That's the question. Is there an opportunity cost?
Right.
No.
Oh, right. Is there right? Exactly. Or you can say it like that also, but instead of different. So it could be that with an olah, again, to the extent that you move olah into the doron camp, right? You say it's only assays, or you say it's lav hanita assays because they're connected to an assay, and you don't entertain Tosfos' option that we're going to extend it to other lavim, or that's the answer to Tosfos' question, is because the purpose of an olah, it's not that it's a doron in the sense that it's just a gift after the sin, but it's a way of coming to God and saying, I have to fix the gavra ha-chote, lav dafka, the maaseh avera. There was no maaseh avera. What did I do? I just sat there. I didn't do anything. I didn't pick up a lulav. There's no maaseh avera not picking up a lulav. But in other words, there are two things that happen. And that, by the way, would make sense that could fit into the Gemara's also about what do we say in the Gemara? First, you have to do the lo ta'aseh, and then you have to do the aseh, right? First, the praklit nichnas, the praklit goes say, and then come to the doron. First, you have to get rid of the maaseh avera. Once you get maaseh avera, then you can do the olah. So maybe the olah is more part of the right. This would not is more part of the gavra, not the gavra achote, but the gavra being sullied. This isn't exactly what the Ramban says, because the Ramban says that the olah is just the highest expression. The korban olah tamid is the highest expression of sin, right? But you could say it differently. You don't have to go down the Ramban's path. You could say the olah, the purpose of the olah, or at least the purpose of some olahs, is to get rid of the sin on the person. It isn't every day that we do a maseh. When the Ramban says, I pointed, you said it before, the Ramban is a Christian, right? He's not a Christian, obviously, but when he says a person sin, you're all sinners. He doesn't mean every single day you do a maseh avera, right? You go out and violate Shabbos. What it means is that you're a gavra hachote, right? Now, even if there isn't a maseh avera, no, maybe that's what it's another way to say it. I don't think this is what the Ramban means. I think the Ramban really meant you've done bad things. But it means you're a sinner because things happen, even if you don't violate Shabbat. Right? What's the best expression of it? What's the best expression of it? That's going to be about Tosfot. You're a gavra chote when what happens? Even if there was no Maaseh Avera. If you ate in that McDonald's on Ben Yehuda Street, your soul has been sullied, even if you haven't done a Maaseh Avera because you don't even know you did a Maaseh Avera. But something's happened.
What about the missed opportunity?
Right? So again, that's if you take the opinion of the Datskim. If you take the Rashi's opinion, right, that it's assays and lo ta'assays. So again, I'm trying to take it back to the discussion of the scope. If it's an assays and lo ta'assays, so it's just a missed opportunity. You can take that to the extreme if you think that the purpose of the olah is for the shiur avera, the Ramban's Agada, or the Datskim about the Tosfot. Lo ta'assays that you never found out about. Right? Both of those things relate to the gavra, or at least I think they relate to the gavra achote. They don't relate to a maaseh avera. You can't say that if you had no knowledge at all, there was a maaseh avera here. You can't say if I forgot for a minute that there was that this was prohibited and there's a maaseh avera. But you can't say if I never found out about it, I never even knew, because my whole life I went to my grave thinking that McDonald's was kosher, there was a maaseh avera involved. But you can say that you've sullied your soul because there's non-kosher food in you, so to speak, right? And again, you can extend it. So that's if you take the extreme position. If you take the normative position, which is the asay lo ta'aseh, so then it's the missed opportunity doesn't mean that you've done a maaseh avera. All it means is that you've sullied your soul a little. You've done something that was objectionable to God because God wanted you to do something, right? How does it work? You ask the kids, can you please help me, right? This never happens in this house, right? You ask the kids, can you help me put away the dishes? And then you wake up the next morning and lo and behold, the dishes are still there. So you feel a little violated, but not because the kids did anything wrong. They just didn't take advantage of the opportunity to do that. So that's what an olah is. So again, we'll stop here.
That may be without him.
Yeah. Okay. So there's three models here. that we're dealing with. Either Rava, it's all a Doron. And then we have to explain. I want to do a couple more texts about this next time. And then we'll have to explain the text that seem to indicate that it's for all these other things, for assays, lotas, etc. Or kapara, and we're going to minimize the different, right, this discrepancy between the chaper alav here and the olah, or there's some place in the middle to say there's two things that actually happen in a sin, and the olah takes care of one, and the chatat and the take care of the other, and maybe that manifests itself in the different things you do. Maybe it's the lost opportunity, or maybe it's less than the lost opportunity. Just here or avera, or just that's getting validated, but it's just you never even knew you sinned, but the olah takes care of that as well. Okay, the two more things we have to do next time, Ritz Hashem, are the bundling. Can I offer one olah for multiple things? I certainly can't offer a chatat for multiple things, right? If I eat this and I eat that, and I try Shabbat or whatever, can you violate chatat? What about an olah? Can I do that for multiple things or not? So that's where we'll start next time. And then next time we're going to get back to some of the Gemaras. Okay, thank you. Okay.
This last week you uploaded your video to YouTube Studio.
I don't even know what that is.
What?
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, you sent a link to YouTube Studio, yeah. YouTube Studio is the editor for YouTube.
I see. Okay. So